Mr. Minister, welcome. Welcome to this discussion. I would like to say that it has been 1 year since the last time we had a similar conversation in the context of DFA, but in the context of DFA, but in a different venue. And I would like to say that since then, 1 year later that is, we have seen many developments. The epicenter of this policy that you have announced and supported by the entire government is this reform in the armed forces, both in terms of organization and armament, which is called Agenda 2030. And I would like you to tell us a few things about the next steps of the Agenda 2030, given that there are many people here who are interested in listening more. Thank you very much for observing that indeed steps have been made. And I would dare to say significant steps. If we take a look back, we can see that LCAC has been developed, which is the Hellenic Defense Innovation Center. We have perceived innovation as a factor that can enhance deterrence, but also a lever of economic growth. The Hellenic Parliament was informed about the new structure of the armed forces, which has been accepted. This has been a significant step, and it has been combined with the mergers of the military facilities and units. We have also promoted the armament program for the years 12+8, and this gives us a clear direction and shows what we want to achieve. And moreover, I also believe that tomorrow the Hellenic Parliament will vote on the reform of the armed forces. So this is where we stand today. Now, what is to follow? First, the change in the management of the real estate of the armed forces. Why? Because we need resources in order to improve the salaries and the quality of life of our officers. When we merged the different camps, we were saying that the savings would be returned to the officers, and nobody believed us back then. However, it has been announced and will become a law. 160 million euros have indeed been returned to the armed forces. And the same rationale pertains to the management of real estate. We need resources in order to improve the quality of life of our officers. Second thing that is to follow is the change in the military service, in the national service. From the national service that was perceived as a chore, now we will have a national service that will be perceived as an opportunity. It will be a new way for the Greek citizens to serve the country, a way that will have meaning for the country. And a soldier of the 21st century will find some meaning in this service. The soldiers will also learn about skills that will be useful for them at a later stage of their life in the labor market. After the national service, we will make some more important changes. A few days ago, in the military academy, we talked about how we can improve the institution of reserves. We have set as an objective to have 150,000 active reservists, trained active reservists, who will help the active army. And of course, all these are combined with a new scheme for salaries for the armed forces and a new career path for the officers of the armed forces. Why? Because everything has changed. The officers of the armed forces, in the greatest majority, will be users of advanced technology products. This idea of the army of the 19th and 20th century has nothing to do with the army or with the air force of the 21st century. And I believe that with these, we will complete a cycle of activity that will take us to 2030. I'm not hiding you that there will be also a second round, a second cycle of mergers of camps and of new savings. Again, what will be saved from this round will further improve the salaries of our officers. Okay, and a second thing I would like to ask you, and has to do with the armament, and of course with the effort to reorganize the armed forces. This has to do with the support to the domestic defense industry. You have said that 25% of the money, the resources, the efforts that are made should be dedicated to the domestic defense industry. How can you make sure that this will happen? Because we have heard in the past many similar announcements. This is a target that pertains exclusively to the armament. There are parts of the armament program in which the Hellenic ecosystem can get 100%. Anything that has to do with the modern soldier, that is approximately 300 million euros, if I remember correctly, in the armament program, can be served by the Hellenic defense industry in its totality. There are other programs where the percentage will be lower, but this is our objective, 25%, and I believe that this is achievable. Of course, we also support this belief on something else. Given that this national defense industry will become more visible, it will be ready to produce products which is not ready to do right now. Moreover, and I have said this repeatedly, we do not, and I want to be sincere, we do not aim only at the domestic market. We want to have an exporting activity. That is, the defense spending should become a lever of growth, of wealth creation, of jobs creation, and of exports. Greece is suffering for many years because of the deficit of the current account balance. A country that is suffering from such a deficit suffers a lot, and we need to correct that. It is a problem in the economic model adopted by the country, and to the extent that we can, in the Ministry of Defense, we can contribute to its correction. So you're saying that the domestic defense industry can contribute to the increase of the pie, of the GDP. Yes, you are absolutely right. Increase the pie. And I understand that this doesn't have to do only with big programs, large-scale programs. Of course, I don't want to underestimate their importance. We're talking about added value, innovation. Yes, exactly. We can see what's going on in Ukraine. Let's take Ukraine as an example. The drones, which constitute the main weapon, okay? The main weapon of the infantry. The infantry uses this weapon, not the rifle or another arm. This is the new reality, and we need to follow this reality and follow a different rationale. We need to follow a different approach in meeting the needs of the country in terms of defense. But also, many of these products are products that are of dual usage. In other words, they happen to do only with the needs of defense, but they can have a commercial usage. So we're talking about a much bigger market. And moreover, what we aspire to achieve is collaborations with ecosystems and with markets of other countries. And I will give you an example, which is obvious. Last Friday, I was visited by a minister of the Emirates at the Ministry of National Defense. One would expect that it would be the Minister of National Defense. No, it wasn't the Minister of National Defense, but the Minister of Investment. And the agenda was focused on investments in the ecosystems of defense innovation. This is the rationale that we are following. We want to be able to leverage through the armament program everything we can in order to produce innovative products, but also produce products that can be exported and are of dual usage. Do you have the institutional support in order to do that? Because in the past, we have seen the defense industries that are not under the Ministry of Defense. The Ministry of Defense is the client. Anyway, we have seen this happening in the past with no results, basically. So what do you think needs to happen? I talked about that previously, and I want to make it clear. The country has suffered because of lack of transparency, to put it elegantly. I said previously that up to 2004, we had spent for armaments 270 billion euros, which is an incredible amount given the size of the country. If this amount had been properly spent, now we would be an exporting superpower. Not in everything, but we could have selected the sectors where we would be pioneers. And in these sectors, we could have covered a lot of distance. Right now, we are trying to make from scratch a defense system in Greece. I have submitted specific proposals that are based on transparency with the participation of the Hellenic Parliament, with the involvement of auditing mechanisms, for which we have already had programming contracts. Moreover, with the intervention of prosecutors, and I have openly invited the opposition parties or bodies of the civil society to submit their proposals. If they have any other idea that would contribute to the sound management of public money, we would adopt them. There is a book, Mr. Nedos, of Robinson and Kakimoglu, who also got an award for this. Why Nations Fail is the title. It explains very well what I'm saying exactly. How corruption leads to collective poverty and failure. We are not worthy of such a fate. We are worthy of something much better. Okay, I take a step back. The decision-making process for the armament. I believe that one of the things pertaining to innovation there is always a problem between expressing the needs, translating the needs, and exporting these needs to the market. In other words, many a time, the things we buy do not correspond to the needs of the army or what the leadership of the armed forces had asked for. Are there any safeguards that can prevent this from happening again? I believe that there is a whole series of stages that allows for a rational choice and selection. First of all, the proposals made by the general staff. I'm a lawyer. This is a profession. I'm not a general. I cannot choose between a missile and another. Maybe I can introduce a political parameter with regard to the country of production. Okay, but I'm not going to say that we should buy drones from the neighboring country, even if they give us at a lower price. I believe that this is obvious. But apart from that, there is the competent committee of the Hellenic Parliament, the decision of which we always ask for any armament program. And I have dropped the limit to 12 million, which for an armament program is a low limit. There will be an analytic update of an expression of the opinion of the competent committee. And regardless of armament program, there will be an analytical briefing and also the opinion of the Hellenic Committee. Then there is a KISE and there is the implementation of the decision. I believe that the stages are sufficient. Now, whether we can, as political system or society, manage our needs for armament systems in order to ensure our existence, then I believe that this is on which everyone will be judged. But I believe that we can make it. Is this a General Directorate of National Security another tool in this direction? The General Directorate of National Security has a different role to play, not this one. Its role is to cover any gaps that exist in terms of internal coordination between ministries. And you talked about the Turkish drones as an example. But since right now there is a discussion taking place, and you actually touched upon that in your intervention, you talked about Rearm Europe and about the rearmament of Europe and the possibilities of third countries taking part in that. The white paper that is also a text that is not final. I believe that this does not leave any open window, but an open door for the participation of third countries like Turkey. Greece, obviously, and always in terms of geopolitical realities, has no interest in seeing this happening. So what are we going to do? How are we going to explain this to the people? Okay, let's take 2 steps back. First of all, you are right that there is a reference made in several European documents to partners, to allies, to friendly countries. There is terminology like this being used. But when we're talking about the European defense, because this is exactly what we're talking about, what do we mean? What does European defense mean? If it means stricto sensu, the defense of a specific geographical area without any other parameter involved, then we can have a different discussion. But I believe that if one goes back to the treaties themselves, and you need to go back to the treaties since they constitute the Constitution of Europe, you will realize that Europe is not geographical space. It is not a defense alliance. Europe is something more than that. It is a very ambitious endeavor, maybe the most ambitious in the history of mankind, of coexistence of societies, of states, of peoples on the basis of common values. This is what is described in the treaties. What are the values? The values are democracy, human rights, state of law, rule of law, the rights of women. These are the values on which Europe is based. So in order to cooperate with someone, in order to defend these values, which, by the way, include the UCLOS, which is the contract which is the law for the sea. So in order to defend these values, we need to choose countries that believe in these values. And I will give you an example. What if we were to invite Afghanistan in order to cooperate for the protection of women's rights? Would that make any sense? Do you think that we would find a common place to have a discussion? How can you invite, as a partner and as a friend, someone who threatens these values in which you believe? And this is exactly what Greece is saying. Greece does not claim that Europe should become a coalition with Turkey. No, of course, we want collaboration, but always on the basis of friendship and of respect. And you know that the conditions are not decided by Greece. We haven't chosen these conditions because they are of interest to us. No, these are the conditions and requirements agreed on by Europe in order for it to exist as a distinct entity, in order to exist as a European Union, as a historical endeavor. This is what we're talking about, and not in the context of an opportunistic need to deal with any sort of threat, to include in this historic endeavor powers that have the opposite trajectory and threaten this endeavor. Do you think that Turkey utilizes this situation in order to promote this view in the European Union? Of course, this is obvious. But I was delighted to hear the day before yesterday that Turkey threatened us with casus belli. This was a public announcement that was made. Of course, we meet with the Turks, but we do not forget. We cannot forget when we meet representatives of a country that this country has issued a casus belli. We cannot pretend that this hasn't happened. We cannot forget that there is this Turkey-Libyan agreement, which is against any sort of reason, of simple reason. It is a memorandum that goes over Crete as if it didn't exist. It's like Greece agreed with Spain in order to decide about an area that does not include Sicily. So I hope that Turkey will remove this memorandum. And I remind you that Greece is, in reality, along with the Cypriot Republic, the main supporters of the European future of Turkey. But how? Only if Turkey accepts the European acquis. Participating in the European endeavor is not à la carte. You talked about Turkey, and I would like to talk about the wider geopolitical developments that influence the choices and decisions. You made a reference previously that when discussions about armaments are taking place, there are also political discussions taking place as well about the direction that the program should take. We are making an effort to develop our domestic industry. We have purchased quite enough European systems, and we have an increased American footprint on the arsenal of the armed forces. And go back to the fiscal side of the story. Can a small country like Greece, with small-sized armed forces, break into so many different parts its arsenal, and then to create an accounting nightmare for the support of those who will follow? You are absolutely right in asking that. I would like to clarify, based on your question, two things. The first is that this specific armament program, apart from its innovative side, has two other parameters. The first is that is included in the fiscal space. It does not create any problems to the country. It is included in the fiscal space that our country has. And second, it has been prioritized. We're not talking about a huge context where the chiefs of general staff choose one thing over the other, and then if they don't like it, they make a different choice. There is prioritization, and prioritization serves the wider defense planning. So there is a given fiscal space and prioritization. Absolutely necessary economic parameters like this did not exist in the past. Second, with regard to saving on the basis of homogenization. During my term, I got some very unpopular decisions. However, that were based on the proposals of the general staffs. We brought down the F4 because we cannot serve different types. We expressed the view that if we find a buyer, we will sell Mirage 2005 and we will get fewer but of a greater capacity modern aircraft, so that in the end we will have three types. F-16s, 50. We are actually looking into turn them into Viper. We are fully aware that having different types is not the best, but I cannot tell you that we are also called to correct some mistakes that are not ours. And a small country with a small budget, Turkey, for example, has 10 times our budget, needs to create economies of scale. This is exactly what the merging of military camps serves, and it is a mistake for people to believe that this reduces our power. On the contrary, it increases. The national economy is strong in itself, but also as a defense footprint, we can also talk about an increased one. You have said in the past, and I'm sure that this is not the right space to say it, that it is not like it is a big supermarket where you can see different products being displayed. One of the basic problems that the Greek companies had in the past was the very small margin of participation of the domestic industry. And I would like to ask something else. How do you plan to help the smaller businesses, the smaller companies, which right now are trying to get some programs in the context of Rearm Europe? I'm talking of the small companies through EDF, through NATO, through this whole constellation of opportunities offered by the European Union. We have created structures in the general staff, and we have also established the Innovation Center, which are ready to support new efforts. ELCAC, the Innovation Center, has two different funds involved on the basis of readiness level that can assist a newly established business in order for it to develop an innovative product. Yesterday, in the context of a different discussion, I used the following example. Two young people, 20 and 21 years old, have an innovative idea to create a drone that may carry weapons. Of course, they do not have money. They are young people. They don't have the money to develop the prototype. So what would they do? Theoretically speaking, they would go to a branch of a bank, meet the director, present the idea, and then say, can you possibly finance this idea so that we can build a prototype and show and see what happens? In Greece, if we forget the existence of the Innovation Center, you know how things would follow. The director would throw them out of the office because there would be no possibility to make a risk assessment in order to give them the money. If we assume that they had some money from the parents and they build the prototype, they would have nowhere to try it out because they would be isolated from the armed forces. And if they found somewhere to test it and they saw that it was okay, they would have no proof of funds that would give them the possibility to develop more than just the prototype. In other words, they would have to encounter one obstacle after the other. Now, what we are doing actually resolves all these issues. Right now, if the armed forces are interested in something and there is a call for interest for a solution, because you know that the Innovation Center does not issue tenders for products. No, it just poses questions. And if there is an answer, there is the possibility to fund it, there is the possibility to build the prototype, there is the possibility to test the prototype, and there is also the possibility to order the prototype. There is also the possibility to get assistance from ecosystems of other countries so that the market to which this product could be sold is bigger. You know, we are a small market. We need to find other markets that communicate with us. And there is also the possibility of collaboration with businesses of other ecosystems of friendly countries so that they can be synergies which in the end optimize the result. Do we have the possibility right now to take part in big European programs? I'm not talking theoretically. Of course, we have the possibility to participate in big European programs, and we have proven that. For example, Matlan, we can build much bigger parts than these frigates. And if we want to be more ambitious, we can be the builders of the next generation of vessels of Constellation, or we can be the manufacturers of the next generation of Bellara. Of course, we have what it takes. The problem is that we have always perceived ourselves in a very narrow context. We need to gain some confidence and open up to the global market as we can, and given the possibilities we have. And it's a great pleasure to see that there is a revival of the Greek shipbuilding industry. You know that the Greek shipbuilding industry cannot survive only thanks to the orders of the Navy. This is a dead end. But if through the leverage provided by the Navy, it got the possibilities to use the know-how in bigger programs, it wouldn't have to limit itself in the repairs or in the building of ships for the Navy. Right now, other countries like Italy, Turkey have a blossoming shipbuilding industry, and they build entertainment ships. Why can we do the same? Recreational ships, excuse me. So why can we do the same? But I would like you to remember one thing, that we need to change mindset. We need to change culture. Our rationale is not that we go to a supermarket in order to choose something from the shelf. No, we are following a different rationale that is based on leveraging the human mind so that we can promote innovation and seize the opportunities that stem from our society. And this can take us a long way ahead. I would like to ask you, this whole discussion about the theoretical result that we will get after some years, how can we be sure that there will be a continuation? Because we will have elections in 2 years, and maybe the government will change, and maybe the next one may say that this is all too much. So how can we make sure that there will be continuation? When we talk about defense, we tend to complain a lot when we are in the opposition. But when we become government, we change our minds. First of all, you don't need to change the government in order to change a minister. Ministers change every now and then in the same government. However, there is one guarantee, and this guarantee is the Greek people and the Greek society, which is wise in my view. We may make wrong choices, but altogether we have an inherent wisdom in us. And I believe that the Greek society, with the choices it makes, ensure the future. I believe that if we manage to conquer something altogether, we will keep it. Greece cannot survive for long with a GDP of 230 million euros. As you said, the pie is small, and the pie needs to become bigger because other countries with similar population have a GDP of 370 billion, double than we have. Why? Why are they richer than we are? What made them richer? We have everything we need in order to do the same. Imagine what would mean if the collective wealth was double, if each Greek had double the money they have today. This is not something that is not feasible. This is the rational thing to do. I'm asking because the political instability in the past had its price in this sector as well. Instability always comes with a cost. If there is not a clear direction with long-term planning, nothing will be done. And this is actually the rationale of the program of the 12 years plus 8. The visibility and the clear direction so that everyone knows where we are headed and what to expect. You're right, instability never helps. But who is the guarantor of security? The Greek people, the Greek society. You know, why do you, they will scold me if I don't ask you why you wear this tie with the airplanes. Is there a meaning hidden? Because we are in the fair. I thought that it would be right to wear something that is slightly military. And if you see it up close, you will see that it's a bird that turns into an airplane. This is the dream of man, to fly. Okay, and I would like to close with one last question that has to do with the dome, because it is a project in which you have been greatly involved, and I believe that this is something that has been accepted by the general staffs as a prerequisite for the development and growth of the armed forces. The domestic defense industry, can it reach 25% in that program? Of course it can, and I will give you a simple example. All these systems will be transferred by vehicles, by platforms. Who is going to build them? Is it necessary to buy them from other countries? Can we produce them? Of course we can. Moreover, anything that will be manufactured, even if it is on the basis of foreign know-how, should it be manufactured abroad? Can it be manufactured here? We are a member of the European Union. If a third country wishes to enter this big European market, isn't it rational to build these systems in Greece? Imagine the transfer of know-how that this involves. For us, of course we can. We can do much more than that, Mr. Nedos, more than 25%. 25% is an ambitious goal for today, but I'm sure that 10 years later, the one who will be sitting in this seat when I will be fishing in Paxi Island will say only 25. It should have been 35, but since we need to be realistic, at least in the beginning, and we need to give some time for the market to overcome its hesitations, that's why we said 25%. And we need to reach 25% and even exceed it. Okay, I would like to thank you very much for this discussion. Thank you. Would you like to say one last thing to our audience? No. What I would like to say is how pleased I feel and how ambitious I am by seeing this great participation in the fair that is organized in Greece. I believe that it speaks for itself. It is a very positive message, and it is combined with the fact that the global ecosystem perceives the effort made by Greece in the guise of Agenda 2030 as a serious endeavor in which it is worthy taking part. Thank you very much.